The wind came down from the Rockies like punishment from a god who'd run out of mercy. Caleb Stone felt it through wool, through leather, straight to the bone as he stared down the snow-buried road. The stagecoach was 3 days late, and each hour stretched thinner than the fence lines he hadn't fixed. Behind him, his 7-year-old daughter pressed her nose to the frosted window. "Papa, I see something." He didn't look. He didn't want hope. "It's snow, baby girl. Just snow." "No, Papa. Something's moving." Caleb turned and froze. A shape staggered in the storm, then collapsed face first into the drift and didn't get up. Christ! He was running before he even knew he'd moved. Boots punched holes in the powder, breath cutting like knives in the wind. 20 yards. 10. He dropped to his knees beside a woman whose hands were shaking so hard he could hear her bones rattle. Her dress was half fabric, half patches, held together by thread that didn't match. No coat, no gloves. Her hair was frozen to her skull in stiff auburn ropes. She looked up, eyes gray-green and unfocused. "Mr. Stone, I'm sorry I'm late." Her lips barely moved. "The stage wouldn't take me further. I had to walk." "Damn fool thing to do," he muttered, right as her legs buckled. He caught her. She weighed almost nothing. "Bones and cold. How long since you ate?" "I'm fine. I just need to. How long?" Something in his voice made her stop pretending. 2 days. Caleb didn't think. He lifted her. She pushed weakly against him. "Please, don't carry me. I don't want to start by being a burden." "You can freeze in my yard then," he snapped. "That what you want?" She went quiet. He kicked snow off the porch steps, shoved through the cabin door, and heat from the fireplace slammed into them both. The woman's breath hitched like she'd been punched. Lucy stood in the center of the room, eyes wide. "Papa, you found her." "Chair," Caleb said. "By the fire." Lucy scrambled. Caleb set the woman down, and she immediately tried to get back. "I can see what you're thinking. Can you now? You're wondering what kind of woman arrives looking like a beggar." Lucy gasped. "You're not a beggar, Miss Abby." Abigail stood. The blanket fell. She swayed, caught herself. "Mr. Stone, you deserve an explanation." "Reckon I do." "Papa." Lucy snapped. "That's rude." "Lucy." "Room. Now." Lucy's face crumpled, but she obeyed. When she was gone, Caleb leaned forward. "Talk." Abigail straightened, dignity reclaiming her spine. "My father was a bank manager. A respectable one. Until he wasn't. He stole from his own bank. Gambled it away. Died before they discovered it. They came for me instead." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I sold everything," she went on. "House. Furniture. Even my mother's books. Paid back every cent. That's a fool thing to do. Maybe. But I sleep at night. You could have run." "I didn't." "Why?" "Because my father's mistakes weren't mine to make," she said. "But his debts were mine to pay. And there was that spark. That steel. Not a beggar. Not a victim. Something much rarer. Character." He looked away. "My wife said something like that once," he muttered. Abigail softened. "She sounds like a woman who knew her own mind." "She was," he said. "Got her killed." Silence. Wind howled outside. Fire popped inside. Abigail lowered herself back into the chair. "I answered your advertisement," she said. "Not for luxury. Not for comfort. I came because it offered honest work and a second chance." "Providence?" Caleb scoffed. "You call showing up half-dead Providence." Color rose in her cheeks. "I didn't plan to walk 2 miles in a blizzard. The stage master refused to take me further without money for meals. I had a choice. Wait in town till spring or walk." "That was stupid." "That was determined," she countered. He almost smiled. "You staying?" She hesitated. "If you'll have me, for the 3-month trial we agreed. I'm a man of my word." "You staying?" Relief flickered across her tired face. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Help with the house." "Lucy." "Cooking. Winter's coming hard. Might lose half the herd. No luxury. No guarantees." "I didn't come for luxury." She swallowed. "I came for a chance to breathe again." He stood. "You'll have a small room. Meals with me and Lucy. $20 a month. After 3 months, we'll talk about making it permanent." Her eyes lifted. "Permanent. We'll see if we suit. And if we don't, then I'll pay your passage back to Boston." "That's fair." "Lucy'll test you," he warned. "She's hungry for company. Scared of losing it." I'll be patient. You'll need to be patient with me, too. He hated how small that sounded, but she only nodded. I can do that. Good, he muttered. He grabbed his coat. I need to see to the horses. Your room's through there. He was halfway out the door when she said, Mr. Stone, why did you send for a bride? He froze. Truth sat on his tongue like a stone. Lucy needs a mother, he said. And I need help. That's all. That's not the whole truth. It's all you're getting tonight. And he stepped into the storm. Behind him, Abigail Hartford stood by the fire, warming hands that had worked too hard for too long. Lucy's door creaked. Small footsteps crossed the hall. He glanced back through the frosted window. Lucy took Abigail's hand. Abigail knelt. Lucy hugged her, and something in Caleb's chest cracked, quietly, painfully, like ice thawing. He went to the barn and worked until his hands stopped shaking. Inside, Abigail unpacked her entire life from a carpet bag. 2 patched dresses, a Bible, a photograph of a family long gone. She lay down on a narrow bed in a room smaller than her old closet. And for the first time in months, she slept. Caleb came in from the barn lawn. After dark, snow clung to his coat, his face raw from wind. He meant to head straight to his room, but Abigail's door was cracked open. He should have kept walking. He didn't. She lay asleep on top of the quilt, still in her patched dress. Auburn hair spread across the pillow like thawed-out copper. In sleep, the fear lines smoothed from her face. She looked younger, bare, human. He took a step back. His boots scraped. Her eyes flew open. She sat up fast, disoriented. I didn't mean to sleep so long. I'll start supper. Supper's done, he muttered. Saved you a plate. She swayed when she stood. He caught her elbow. Easy. I'm fine. Just got up too fast. You're exhausted, he said. Sit. Eat. Then rest. I should help clean, I said rest. Her chin lifted. I don't like being spoken to like a child, Mr. Stone. And I don't like repeating myself. The room stretched tight around them. Finally, she sat. He brought her a bowl of venison stew. Steam rose in the cold air. Abigail ate like someone who remembered manners, but not meals. When she finished the first bowl, her eyes flicked to the pot. Go on, Caleb said. I shouldn't. You should. She took another. Slower this time. Color crept back into her face. This is excellent, she said. It's basic. Basic is luxury when you've been living on bread and water. The words dropped like stones. Caleb set down his cup. How long? What? How long living on bread and water? She folded her hands in her lap. For months. He swore under his breath. Silence settled. Heavy. Unsparing. You need to know something, he said at last. This valley's isolated. Town's 4 hours away on a good day. Winter will cut us off for weeks. No society. No visitors. No church unless you ride through it. I'm not looking for society, she said. What are you looking for? Abigail stared into the fire. Peace. A place that doesn't choke me with my past. He couldn't argue. He understood trying to outrun ghosts. She washed her dish and moved through his kitchen like she'd been there a week, not a day. Not intruding, just quietly fitting into space Sarah once held. That should have bothered him. It didn't, and that scared him more than anything. Caleb sat at his father's old workbench in the barn. Tools hung neatly. He hadn't touched most of them since Sarah died. Her handwriting marked a verse in the Bible beside him. He thumbed it open. Worth is measured by character, not circumstance. He read it twice. Through the cabin window, he saw movement. Abigail sat beside Lucy's bed, smoothing the child's hair. Lucy held her hand in sleep, small, trusting, unafraid. Abigail was singing, quiet, steady, a song Caleb had never heard. He stood in the cold, breath thick in the air, watching through the frost. Lucy's grip didn't loosen. Even in sleep, she wouldn't let go. Caleb swallowed hard. Sarah would have loved that. He didn't know when the thought stopped hurting and started feeling like truth. He turned back to the barn, found a small block of wood, set to carving because he didn't know what else to do with feelings that didn't fit in his chest. The knife moved on its own. Wood curled. Hours passed. When he finally stopped, dawn hovered over the mountains like a held breath. In his hand was a wooden flower. Delicate, careful, a thing he'd made only when he still believed in beauty. Beside it, In a box wrapped in an old handkerchief lay a ring. Sarah had left a note with it once. For the next woman worthy of your heart. If you ever find her. He hadn't expected to. He hadn't planned to. But something was shifting. Something honest. Something dangerous. He blew out the lantern. Time to see which way the wind would blow. Morning light spilled through the cabin windows, soft and gold. Caleb had cooked breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. Moving with the steady discipline of a man who needed tasks to keep his thoughts from running wild. Abigail stepped into the kitchen with freshly washed hair braided over one shoulder. She hesitated, unsure if she was intruding. Caleb didn't look up from the stove. Sit. Food's ready. She sat, wary, quiet. He placed a plate in front of her. Then one for Lucy. Then finally, after everything else, his own. For a moment, only the clink of forks filled the room. Lucy broke the silence first. Papa? Miss Abby knows stories. She told me one last night. Caleb's voice softened. That's so. Abigail nodded once. It helped her sleep. He didn't answer, but something eased in his shoulders, just a little. When breakfast ended, Lucy ran outside to check for snow icicles under the porch, leaving Caleb and Abigail alone at the table. Caleb cleared his throat. About yesterday. About how you arrived. I know how I looked, she said quickly. There's more to it than that. Her eyes lifted slowly to his. He reached into his coat and pulled out the carved wooden flower. Set it between them. Abigail stared, breath catching. I made that, he said, voice low. Last night. Hadn't picked up a carving knife in 2 years. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's honest, he corrected. Like you. Her cheeks warmed. Then he reached for his pocket again. This time a small box. His hand hovered, uncertain. I need to say this right, he murmured. Abigail sat perfectly still. Not breathing. Not blinking. I looked at you when you arrived and saw rags, he said. Saw what the town would say. Saw what people judge before they understand. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt. I was wrong, he said. Dead wrong. He pushed the box toward her, but didn't open it. You walked here through a blizzard. Starving. Half frozen. But you held on to every ounce of dignity you had left. His voice roughened. And that showed me something I hadn't seen in a long time. She swallowed. What's that? Worth, he said quietly. Real worth. The kind you can't buy and can't fake. Her eyes glistened. I'm not asking you for anything yet, he said. Not making promises before we know what this is. But I want you to understand one thing, silence. You belong here more than you think. Her throat tightened. Do I? Yes, he said simply. You do. A long, tender quiet filled the space between them. Finally, Abigail reached out and touched the wooden flower. Her hand shook. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. I should have seen you sooner. Seeing takes time. His breath left him in a quiet laugh. She always said things like that. Soft truths that landed harder than arguments. Before he could speak again, Lucy burst through the door. Papa, Miss Abby, a wagon's coming. Caleb froze. No one comes out here in winter, he said under his breath. He grabbed his coat, motioned Abigail behind him. The wagon rounded the bend, white, rattling, pulled by a tired horse. And in the seat sat a tall woman with iron gray hair, wrapped in a heavy cloak. Not someone Caleb recognized, but Abigail did. Her face drained. No, she whispered. Not her. Caleb turned sharply. You know this woman? Abigail backed up a step. Yes, that's Mrs. Whitfield. Who is she? My former employer, Abigail said softly. The woman who fired me after my father died. The wagon rolled to a stop. Snow settling. Silence stretching. Caleb stepped forward first, but Abigail caught his sleeve. Be careful, she whispered. That woman brings trouble wherever she goes. Caleb met her eyes. So do blizzards, he said, and we got through one of those. They faced the wagon together. The storm outside had passed, but the storm arriving now had a name. And history, an unfinished business. Snow drifted around the wagon wheels as the stranger pulled the reins and brought the tired horse to a halt. The wind eased, letting her voice cut through the cold. Miss Hartford. Abigail flinched as if struck. Caleb stepped forward instantly, instinctively placing himself between her and the woman. "You've come a far way," he said evenly. "State your business." Mrs. Whitfield adjusted her gloves with practiced, chilly precision. Everything about her looked polished, too polished, like she'd stepped straight out of Boston's drawing rooms into Montana snow without realizing she was out of place. "My business," she replied, "is with Miss Hartford." Abigail stiffened beside him. Caleb didn't move. "Then you can speak it right here." Mrs. Whitfield's thin lips tightened. "Mr. Stone, I assure you, you can speak it right here," he repeated, voice low, firm, leaving no room for argument. She exhaled sharply, very clearly displeased. "It seems," she said, turning a pointed gaze toward Abigail, "that my letter did not produce the intended effect." Abigail's breath hitched. Caleb's jaw tensed. "You sent that letter," he said. "Not a question. An accusation." "Of course I did. A man deserves to know what kind of woman he's brought into his home." Caleb's voice turned cold. "What kind is that exactly?" Mrs. Whitfield leaned forward slightly. "A woman," she said, "who brought disgrace upon my school, who involved herself with a married trustee, she did nothing wrong." Caleb's voice cut clean through her words. Mrs. Whitfield blinked. "You can't truly believe—" "I believe her," Caleb said. "Every word she told me. The letter you wrote wasn't truth. It was punishment." Abigail's eyes widened. She'd expected many things today: fear, anger, a return of doubt, but not Caleb's instantaneous defense. Mrs. Whitfield's nostrils flared. "You were always naive, Miss Hartford. Always too trusting. Too hopeful. You truly thought you could run across the country and escape your reputation." Abigail stepped forward then, voice trembling but steady. "I didn't run from my reputation. I ran from you." Mrs. Whitfield's eyes sharpened. "You ruined me." Abigail continued, gripping the edges of her shawl. "You took the word of a married man over mine. You dismissed me without hearing the truth. And when I left, when I tried to rebuild my life, you made sure I couldn't get letters of reference. No school would hire me. You made sure of that." Mrs. Whitfield shrugged. "A woman in your position was not suitable for Beacon Hill. I did what was necessary. You destroyed my livelihood. I protected the academy." "You protected Edmund Pierce," Abigail said softly, "because he had money, influence, and a wife you didn't want to offend." Mrs. Whitfield's mouth twitched, just briefly, at the mention of the wife. Abigail saw it. Caleb saw it. "You fired me because the trustee's wife was your cousin," Abigail whispered. "That's why. Not because I did anything wrong. Not because I was at fault. Because your family name mattered more to you than the truth." Mrs. Whitfield's gloved fingers curled around the reins. "That incident," she said slowly, "is in the past." "Not for me," Abigail answered. "It followed me all the way here. And apparently," Mrs. Whitfield said sharply, "you've convinced this man that you're innocent." "I didn't need convincing," Caleb replied. "I needed to listen. And I did." Mrs. Whitfield's eyes flicked to him. Hard. Measuring. "She is not who she pretends to be, Mr. Stone. She's exactly who she pretends to be," he said. "A woman who worked harder than anyone had a right to expect. Who paid her father's debts at great personal cost. Who walked through a blizzard to keep her word. Who saved my daughter from nightmares. Who's honest at her core." Abigail's breath shuddered. Caleb's voice stayed steel steady. "And even if none of that were true," he said, "she's still the woman I chose." Mrs. Whitfield considered him, like a judge measuring guilt and innocence. But something in his stance, in the unyielding strength of his shoulders, told her persuasion was useless here. She shifted her attention back to Abigail. "I came to give you one last chance," she said. Abigail frowned. "A chance. To leave." Her voice softened, not kindly, but deliberately persuasive. "You think you can outrun Boston? Outrun shame? Outrun the truth of what happened in that schoolroom?" She leaned closer. "The West is growing, Miss Hartford. Towns will spread. News travels. Reputation follows. Especially a reputation like yours." Caleb stepped forward, fury barely contained. But Abigail held out a hand, stopping him. "Let her speak," she murmured. He stayed still, but every muscle was coiled tight. Mrs. Whitfield inhaled frost-cold air. "My advice to you," she said, "is to leave before this man realizes he's made a mistake. Before this town realizes who you are. Before his daughter grows attached." Abigail's stomach twisted. That was the blade Mrs. Whitfield always reached for, cutting where it hurt most. Abigail lowered her eyes for a moment, letting the cold settle inside her, letting every word sink deep. Then she lifted her chin. "No," Mrs. Whitfield blinked. "No, no, I'm not leaving." Her voice grew stronger, warmer. "For years, you made me believe I had no worth. You crushed opportunities, shut doors, and used your influence to silence me. But you don't owe me anymore. You don't get to tell me who I am." Mrs. Whitfield straightened, jaw tight. "My life," Abigail said, "doesn't belong to you. It belongs to me, to the family I'm building, to the peace I've found out here. You can take your threats, your judgment, and your letters," she exhaled, "and leave." Caleb stared at her, softening every line of his face. Mrs. Whitfield's mouth pressed thin. "You will regret this." Abigail shook her head. "I regret many things," she whispered. "Listening to you is one of them." For a long moment, Mrs. Whitfield held Abigail's gaze, assessing, judging, failing to comprehend this new version of the woman she once controlled. Then, finally, without another word, she whipped the reins. Her horse lurched forward, hooves crunching through snow, carrying her away. The wagon grew smaller and smaller until it vanished through the tree line. Only then did Abigail's body sag, like breath leaving her all at once. Caleb reached her in 2 strides. "Abby," his voice was soft. A question, a comfort, a promise. She pressed a shaking hand against her forehead. "I didn't know she would come," she whispered. "I didn't know she would follow me this far." "You handled her," he said. "I tried." "No," Caleb said firmly. "You did more than try. You stood your ground. You protected yourself. You spoke truth right to her face. That takes courage." A tear slipped down Abigail's cheek. Not from fear, from release. "Caleb, I thought," her voice broke. "I thought she would convince you. Or convince the town. Or, Abby," he murmured, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "Look at me. She did. I know who you are. Nothing she says changes that." Her breath trembled. "And Lucy," she whispered. Caleb drew a slow breath. "My daughter adores you. You think she believes some fancy stranger over the woman who tucks her in at night." Abigail's shoulders finally shook, this time with relief. Caleb stepped forward and gathered her into his arms. She went willingly, gratefully, resting her forehead against his chest, letting the warmth seep in. For a long, quiet moment, the world shrank to just the two of them. And then, a small voice behind them. "Miss Abby, why are you crying?" Lucy stood there in the snow, clutching her doll, eyes big with worry. Abigail wiped her cheeks quickly. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just a little overwhelmed." Lucy hurried forward and took Abigail's hand with both of hers. "You don't have to cry," she said earnestly. "You have us now." Abigail's heart twisted, warm and aching. Caleb crouched beside his daughter. "Lucy," he said gently, "Miss Abby had a visitor she didn't want. But everything's fine now." Lucy turned to Abigail and wrapped her small arms around her waist. "I don't want anyone to make you sad," she said fiercely. "I want you to stay forever." Abigail's breath caught, not because the words hurt, but because they healed. Caleb rose slowly, watching them, watching how naturally Abigail bent down to hold Lucy, how instinctively Lucy sought her comfort. He felt something move inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope shifting into certainty. He cleared his throat softly. "Both of you should get inside," he said. "Storm's picking up again." Abigail nodded and took Lucy's hand, but she paused at the doorway, turned back to him. "Caleb, thank you." "For what?" "For believing me," she whispered. He held her gaze. "Always. A promise. Simple. Steady. True." Abigail stepped inside with Lucy. Caleb stayed outside a moment longer, watching the place where the wagon tracks faded into the snow. He wasn't fooled. Mrs. Whitfield wouldn't forget today. She would write letters, send gossip, stoke fires in whatever direction she felt justified. Trouble might still come. But now, they faced it together. Inside the cabin, Abigail helped Lucy hang her coat near the fire. Lucy chattered happily, unaware of how close the past had come to destroying the peace they'd built. Abigail set her hand on the mantel to steady herself, and found Caleb's hand closing gently over hers from behind. She turned. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said quietly. She nodded, swallowing hard. But inside, something tender and fierce bloomed. A belonging she'd never known. A family she'd never expected. A man who stood between her and every storm. Not to shield her, but to stand with her. She had never felt more seen, or more chosen. But outside, beyond the warmth of the cabin, the wind rose, carrying with it a whisper of trouble on the horizon. Not from Mrs. Whitfield alone, but from the town, from those who whispered, from those who'd already judged, from those who would soon hear every lie she'd spent years outrunning. The peace they'd found today wouldn't hold forever, and the storm coming next would test them all. Snow softened the world into silence over the next 2 days, smoothing every harsh line of the valley. The cabin glowed warm against the white hills, smoke curling gently from the chimney. From the outside, it looked like the picture of peace. Inside, peace was hanging by a thread. Abigail moved through the kitchen with steady hands, kneading dough, stirring stew, wiping the counter down until it shined. But her mind, her heart, had not stopped trembling since Mrs. Whitfield's visit. Caleb noticed. He always noticed. He watched her from the doorway as she hung Lucy's mittens near the fire. The girls had tracked in snow, leaving little puddles across the floorboards, but Abigail didn't complain. She smiled at their chatter, tucked their hair behind their ears, and sent them to wash up for supper. Only when they were gone did her shoulders fall. Caleb stepped closer. "You slept?" he asked. "A little. You ate?" "Some. You worried?" Her breath caught. That was the real question. "People talk," she whispered. "People always talk. But this time they'll talk about you. And Lucy. And your home. And the woman you brought here from Boston." He stepped close enough for the firelight to warm both their faces. "Abby, I'm not scared to talk." She looked up at him then, eyes soft with exhaustion and something deeper. "You should be," she said quietly. "Your life, your name, means something here. Your neighbors trust you. They trust your judgment. But if they think you've been deceived, I haven't been deceived. That's not what they'll think." He studied her. She looked strong. She looked steady. But inside, she looked braced for a blow. He reached out, touched her chin gently, lifting her gaze. "I know who you are." Her eyes filled instantly. Before she could speak, she turned away, breath shaking. "I don't want to bring shame to your family," she whispered. "You won't." "Caleb." He stepped behind her, close enough to feel her tense. "You think I'd let gossip touch you? Harm you? Make you run?" She closed her eyes. "Caleb, it ruined my life once. Not again." He said it with conviction that wrapped around her like a coat she didn't know she needed. But she still shook her head softly. "I don't want Lucy hearing lies about me." Caleb's jaw tightened. "She won't. You can't protect her from everything. I can protect her from you leaving." That made her turn so fast her braids swung behind her. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You think I'm leaving? Tell me you're not," he said. The fire popped. Snow tapped at the window. Her heartbeat filled the room. "I'm not," she whispered. "I chose this home. I chose this family." He exhaled, slow and rough, like he'd been holding air for hours. "And I choose you," she said. Caleb stepped closer. Just one step, but it felt like the most important step of his life. He didn't touch her again. He didn't have to. The air between them already burned with something real. But the moment broke when footsteps pounded overhead. Lucy's voice rang down the stairs. "Papa, Miss Abby, Mrs. Dewey's wagon is coming." Caleb stiffened. Abigail's breath caught. "Another visitor?" she whispered. Caleb grabbed his coat. "That woman doesn't come out in winter unless trouble's riding her boots." Mrs. Dewey was a round, red-cheeked woman in her 60s who kept half the town's secrets and spread the other half. Her wagon rattled into the yard, skirts fluttering like sails in the wind. "Oh, Caleb, thank the Lord you're home," she cried, climbing down. "Snow's harder than iron today." My hands nearly froze to the reins. Caleb forced a smile. "What brings you this way?" Mrs. Dewey bustled forward, breath pluming. "Well," she said, lowering her voice, "the ladies' circle met yesterday, and, well, news came. News about your—" Her eyes darted to Abigail. "Oh." Abigail stepped forward, chin high. "It's all right, Mrs. Dewey. You can say it." The older woman winced sympathetically. "Word is a letter arrived for Boston about a scandal involving a schoolteacher. And, well, people are saying that teacher is you." Abigail felt her spine lock. Caleb stepped between them, so subtly Mrs. Dewey didn't even realize she'd been shielded. "And what else are people saying?" he asked. Mrs. Dewey shifted uncomfortably. "That Caleb Stone brought a fallen woman into his home. That he doesn't know what she did. That he's letting her near his daughter." Caleb's jaw tensed. "And what do you think?" he asked. Mrs. Dewey looked from him to Abigail to Lucy, who stood behind them clutching her doll. Slowly, the older woman's face softened. "I think," she said quietly, "that Miss Abigail has done more good for this home in 10 days than most women do in a year." Abigail's breath shook. "And I think," Mrs. Dewey continued, "that gossip is usually the work of unhappy women with too much time and too little kindness." Caleb almost smiled. Almost. Mrs. Dewey drew herself up proudly. "I came to warn you, not to condemn you. Folks may talk, but not everyone listens. You two stand firm and keep your heads high." She touched Abigail's hand gently. "And dear, don't you run. Not now." Abigail's eyes stung. Caleb cleared his throat roughly. "Thank you," he said. Mrs. Dewey waved him off. "Don't thank me. I'm just too old to tolerate nonsense." She left as quickly as she came. But the damage remained. Abigail sank onto the porch steps, shoulders slumped. Caleb sat beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, "Abby," he said softly, "look at me." She did. "You're not the one who should feel ashamed." Her breath trembled. "But they'll always think, let them think," he cut in. "We know the truth. And the town, they'll learn. And if they don't," he turned fully toward her, "I don't choose my life based on the town's approval. I choose it based on yours." Her breath caught. "Why mine?" "Because you're the one who holds Lucy when she cries. You're the one who warms this house. You're the one who walked through hell and still kept her dignity. You're the one who makes this place feel alive." His hand curled in his coat, trying to stop himself from saying more, but he couldn't. "And because," he whispered, "I haven't felt peace since Sarah died, until you." Abigail's lips parted. Caleb reached out, slowly, gently, but he didn't touch her cheek or her waist or her hand. Instead, he took the wooden flower from his pocket, placed it in her palm. Her breath broke. "You don't have to make any decisions now," he said softly, "but I want you to know what I feel." Her fingers curled around the carved petals. "Caleb," she whispered, "this means something. It's meant something since the night I carved it." Before either of them could say more, Lucy came bounding out the door. "Papa, Miss Abby, can we go feed the horses?" Abigail wiped her eyes quickly and stood. "Yes," she said gently. "We can." Caleb rose too, feeling something inside him shift once more. Not fear, not uncertainty, something warmer, stronger, something like the beginning of love. The barn smelled of hay and wood smoke. The horses snorted softly, stamping hooves in the packed straw. Lucy ran ahead, giggling, holding a bucket of grain too heavy for her little arms. Abigail followed, brushing snow from her skirt. Caleb watched them both. Watched how easily they moved together. How naturally Abigail bent to help Lucy dump the grain. How Lucy leaned in her side like she'd always belonged there. He felt the weight of Sarah's ring in his pocket, the note she'd left, the permission she'd given him years before he was ready. Abigail looked back at him just then. Soft smile, soft eyes. His heart thudded. The barn door, her face in lamplight was soft, almost vulnerable. "She feels safe with you," Caleb whispered. Abigail stroked the child's hair. "I feel safe with her." He swallowed. "And with me?" he asked quietly. Her eyes lifted slowly, steadily. Yes, she breathed. Something in Caleb finally broke free. He reached out, hesitated, then brushed a single strand of hair behind her ear. Good, he whispered. Lucy stirred, breaking the moment. Caleb lifted her gently and carried her to bed. When he returned, Abigail was standing by the fire, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. Caleb, she whispered, what happens now? He stepped closer. You stay, he said. She opened her mouth to speak, but he wasn't finished. You stay, he repeated, voice low. We finish winter together. We face the town together. We protect Lucy together. We build something steady, something real. Her heart pounded. And after winter, she whispered. His answer was soft, deep, unmistakable. We see if you'll take my name. Her breath broke. Her hand flew to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. Caleb, she whispered. He stepped close enough to catch her tears with his thumb. No rush, he murmured. No pressure. Just truth. And your truth is that I won't lose you, he said gently. Not to Boston. Not to gossip. Not to fear. Not to anything. She sobbed softly, relief and love tangled together. Caleb, he didn't kiss her. Not yet. Not tonight. But he pulled her into his arms, slowly, carefully, completely. She melted against him, breathing him in, trusting him fully. Her tears soaked his shirt. His heartbeat steadied against her cheek. For the first time since arriving in his home, Abigail Hartford did not feel like a guest. She felt like something else entirely. Someone claimed, someone chosen, someone loved, even if the word had not yet been spoken aloud. Caleb held her tighter. Stay through winter, he whispered. She nodded against his chest. Stay through spring. She nodded again. Stay, he breathed, voice cracking. As long as your heart wants to. She lifted her face, tears catching firelight. It wants to stay, she whispered. It wants to stay with you. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, Caleb Stone let himself imagine a future that wasn't marked by loss but by hope. Possible, gentle, real. The storm outside held on, but inside the cabin, a new beginning took root. Tender, steady, unbreakable. Winter loosened its grip slowly, like an old man reluctant to leave his bed. Day by day, the snow on the stone ranch pulled back from the fields, revealing patches of stubborn yellow grass and the muddy promise of spring. The air smelled different now, wet earth, thawing pine, the first hints of new life pushing through the cold. And inside the cabin, something else was thawing too. Something between Caleb and Abigail. Something careful, something steady, something real, but neither dare name it yet. Not while the town still whispered. Not while uncertainty still hovered like smoke over the valley. Not while Abigail still feared her past could lash out one last time. And yet, Caleb had hope in his eyes every time he looked at her. On the first morning warm enough for mud instead of ice, Abigail stood outside sweeping the porch. The snow had melted into slush at the edges of the steps, making each drag of the broom feel heavier. Lucy burst through the door behind her, muddy boots and all. Miss Abby, Papa said we're going to town today. Abigail paused mid-sweep. To town. Lucy nodded so hard her braid bounced. He said it's time to buy seed and supplies and she leaned closer, whispering loudly. And he said he's getting you something special. Abigail blinked. Special. Lucy nodded again, eyes wide with excitement. I think it's a pretty dress. Heat climbed Abigail's cheeks. A dress? Why would he buy me a dress? Lucy shrugged. I don't know. Maybe he wants you to feel happy here. Abigail's broom slipped from her fingers. Her heart skipped. Happy here. She hadn't expected happiness ever again. Caleb stepped out then, boots crunching on slush. We should leave before the road mud traps the wagon, he said, adjusting his hat. Abigail met his eyes. He smiled softly. You ready? Her breath trembled. Yes, she whispered. The wagon rattled down the softened winter road, wheels splashing through muddy melt. Caleb held the reins steady. Lucy bounced on the seat between them, and Abigail sat to the far side, hands tucked in her lap. Lucy pointed at everything. Split rail fences, thawing creeks, geese flying overhead. and each time she pointed, Abigail leaned in, listening with patient delight as if the child were showing her treasures. Caleb kept stealing glances at her. Every glance pulled something warm and dangerous through his ribs. She looked soft, peaceful, almost like she belonged here more than any of them. As the wagon approached Pine Ridge, the nearest town, Caleb straightened. He slowed the reins just slightly. Abigail didn't miss it. "You're nervous," she said softly. "Not for me." Her hand brushed his sleeve, just enough to steady him. He shot her a quick look. "I can face anything," she murmured, "as long as you're beside me." It was the first time she'd spoken something that bold. Caleb swallowed hard. "You ain't facing it alone," he said. Pine Ridge looked different. Through Abigail's eyes, timid, uncertain, searching for signs of judgment in every window. Women paused outside the mercantile as she walked by. Two men tipped hats at Caleb, but stared at her too long. Children whispered behind gloved hands. The world narrowed. Her pulse quickened. Old fears rose like ghosts in her throat. Caleb felt her stiffen beside him. He placed his hand against the small of her back. Not possessive, not claiming, just grounding. She looked up at him. His eyes steady, his posture unchanging, his presence home. Her lungs loosened. Inside the mercantile, Mrs. Harper stood behind the counter, sorting bolts of cloth. When she looked up, her eyes widened, but she forced a polite smile. "Mr. Stone." "Miss." "Abigail." Abigail tensed. Caleb spoke before anything could twist. "We're here for spring supplies," he said calmly. "And some things for Lucy." Mrs. Harper brightened. "Of course. Lucy's outgrown every dress she owns." Abigail let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. For the next half hour, she helped choose Lucy's clothes, measured fabric, checked seed packets. Lucy chattered constantly, making Abigail laugh despite herself. Caleb watched them from the corner of his eye, pretending to inspect hammer handles. Mrs. Harper seemed to watch too. Finally, when Lucy ran off to find candy, Mrs. Harper leaned across the counter toward Abigail. "You're a kind woman," she said quietly. "Many people in this town talk. They don't know your story. They only know rumors." Abigail swallowed. "But I know what I saw the other day," Mrs. Harper continued. "A child running into your arms like she finally had someone to trust again. And that speaks louder than gossip." Tears filled Abigail's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Room felt still, quiet, expectant. Abigail stood by the fire, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Caleb stepped closer. "You're thinking hard," he said. "I am." "What about?" She lifted her eyes to his. "You, Lucy, this home, what it's becoming. And what's it becoming? A place where I'm not frightened." Her voice trembled. "A place where I'm allowed to have a future." Caleb's breath caught. She stepped closer, just one step, but her eyes told him everything. "You asked for a promise," she whispered. "And I do have one." His heart hammered. Abigail took his hand, slowly, gently, fingers trembling as they laced with his. "My promise," she said, voice soft as snow, "is that I won't leave." Caleb closed his eyes. When he opened them, something deep and long buried flickered there. "Abby," she lifted his hand to her cheek. "I choose this family," she whispered. "I choose you." Caleb stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. She melted into him as if she'd been holding herself together for years and finally could stop. He held her head to his chest. Her arms circled his waist. Their breath matched. He whispered into her hair, "Then stay." "I will." "Past winter?" "Yes." "Past spring?" "Yes." "Past every hard thing the world tries to throw at us." Her voice cracked. "Yes, Caleb. Yes." He cupped her face. "Abby," she closed her eyes. "You're my future," he whispered. She opened her eyes, full of hope, full of tears, and nodded. "And you're mine." He kissed her. Soft. Sure. Slow as the melting snow outside. A promise sealed. A home finally complete. A family rebuilt from loss, choice, courage, and love. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wild West Emotional Tales, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.